The mashed potatoes hadn't even cooled when Jenna smirked. Fork poised, voice sugar-coated. "You have 1 week to leave." It was said like a joke. A casual flick of power across roasted vegetables and linen napkins. My sister leaned back in her chair like a queen delivering exile. I looked around the table. Mom didn't flinch. She just nodded, sipping her wine. Dad stared at his plate. Silent. Complicit. I set my fork down. Slow. Deliberate. No tremble. "I'm sorry?" I asked, even though I wasn't. Jenna dabbed the corner of her mouth with her napkin. "We've decided it's time. You've had your run here. It's just not your house anymore." I watched the betrayal move like a ghost between their glances. Coordinated. Clean. They'd talked about this. Probably over group texts and fake hugs. Behind closed doors while I scrubbed floors and fixed leaky pipes in the very house they now wanted me gone from. No one asked how the roof got replaced, how the utilities stayed on, how Grandma's garden still bloomed. That was me. But they never saw me. I was just here. The extra daughter. The one who didn't move away or chase a big job or marry into some Pinterest-worthy family. I stayed. Kept the house standing. And this dinner? Was the thank you. 1 week. Jenna raised her glass. No hard feelings, right? I didn't answer. Instead, I reached into the tote bag at my feet, pulled out a thick folder, set it on the table with a soft thud. They looked at it like it might explode. I opened it, turned the first page toward them. Property title, 712 East Willow Street. Owner, Danielle Monroe. Transfer date, August 11th, 2 years before Grandma passed. Jenna blinked. Mom's wineglass paused midair. Dad looked up for the first time in 20 minutes. I slid the next document across the table. Recorded deed. Notarized. Filed. Valid. I leaned forward. Calm. Precise. "Actually, you have 24 hours. Jenna's smirk evaporated. Mom opened her mouth, then closed it. Dad stared. Forks dropped. The potatoes went cold. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't cry. I just stood, smoothed my blouse, and said, "Dessert's in the fridge. Help yourselves. It's your last night here." I walked out of the dining room. Behind me, chairs scraped. Whispers exploded. But I didn't stop, because they thought they were delivering judgment. But I'd already delivered notice. My name is Danielle Monroe. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Because the day they tried to evict me from the house I saved was the day they learned who really owned the foundation they stood on. And tomorrow, they'd be standing on sidewalk. They never saw me. Not really. I was the girl who stayed behind. While Jenna graduated with a fancy degree and a perfectly filtered life, I was wiping counters in the same kitchen I grew up in, helping Grandma after her second fall, picking up groceries, covering bills when her pension ran short. When Dad lost his job, it was me who paid the electric. When Mom had her episode, it was me who sat by her bed with tea and silence. And when Grandma died, they all cried at the funeral. But I'm the one who cleaned her house while they sorted through her jewelry. I stayed. I painted the porch. I fixed the water heater. I cooked dinners in a home that didn't feel like mine because I was always told it wasn't. "You're just lucky we let you stay here," Mom used to say. As if I was a guest. As if Grandma didn't sit me down one rainy evening, 2 years before she passed, and say, "They'll circle like vultures when I'm gone. So, I'm giving you the deed now. Quietly. You're the only one who stayed. You earned this." She had her lawyer come to the house that same week. Signed the papers. Made it official. No drama. No announcement. Just the truth, written in ink. But I didn't tell anyone. Because I didn't need applause. I needed protection. So I filed the deed, kept up the taxes, and let them keep pretending they'd inherited something from a woman they hadn't called in months. And when Jenna moved back in after her second divorce, I didn't say no. I gave her the guest room, listened to her cry about alimony and designer handbags, let her take the last muffin, borrow my car, mock my clothes. She called me a charity case. Said, "You still shop at clearance racks, huh?" I laughed it off. because I was used to being the background character in her movie. But what she didn't know was that I was producing the set. When she started bringing Mom around more, I saw it coming. The whispers behind doors. The fake kindness. Then the family meeting. The dinner where they told me I had 1 week to leave. Like they were doing me a favor by warning me. Like I didn't have every receipt of what I paid to keep this house standing. Jenna was used to winning through charm. Mom was used to controlling through guilt. Dad, he was just used to disappearing. And me? I was the girl with the quiet voice and the iron spine. The one who watched, learned, documented. The one they thought would cry. But the thing is, you can't evict someone from their own house, especially when she holds the title. And now, they were about to learn that the invisible heir was never a guest. She was the landlord, and rent was past due. It didn't happen overnight. No betrayal ever does. It starts in whispers, in glances exchanged when you enter a room, in accidental omissions, in the tightening of a smile that used to be real. The first sign? Jenna stopped contributing to groceries, then to utilities. Things are tight right now, she'd say, while wearing a new watch. Mom started spending more nights at the house too. Said she just missed her girls. What she really missed? Control. She started rearranging things, kitchen shelves, photos, routines. One day, I found Grandma's quilt folded and shoved in the attic. She would have wanted a cleaner look, Mom said. Then came the visits from that real estate agent. At first, Jenna pretended she didn't know him. Oh, he's just a friend. Wanted to see the place. But I saw the tape measure. The way he took notes. The way they called the house a transitional space. That was their plan. To transition me out. They figured they could wear me down. Pretend it was a family decision. For everyone's future. I'd been through this with them before. When Dad sold off Grandma's car behind her back. When Mom borrowed her medical money and forgot to pay it back. When Jenna promised to care for Grandma after surgery and never showed up. They always came back when it was convenient, when there was something left to take. So I waited, watched, smiled through dinner even when it tasted like manipulation. And then, they pushed. Jenna brought it up at the table like she was offering me a deal. You can take the little apartment over on 5th. We'll help you set up. We. Like they were a unit now. I set my glass down. I live here. I said plainly. Jenna blinked. You've been here. Doesn't mean it's yours. Mom nodded slowly. We just think you'd be happier somewhere smaller. Less burden. I looked at Dad. He didn't even meet my eyes. That's when I knew it was already decided. They were going to claim the house. Sell it maybe. Or move in and hand me a deadline. They didn't expect a fight. I was too quiet. Too agreeable. I was the one who always stepped aside. But not this time. I stood up. Went to my room. Pulled out the folder I'd been saving for 2 years. The deed. The notarized paperwork. The tax receipts. The upgrade contracts in my name. I didn't storm back into the dining room. I returned calmly. Sat down. Let Jenna finish her wine. And then, I opened the folder. Their plan was clean. But mine was signed, sealed, and legal. They thought I was still the extra daughter. But they forgot. I was the one who stayed. The one Grandma chose. And that house was already mine. They just hadn't gotten the memo. Yet. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't scream. Didn't cry. That would have made it easier for them to write me off as emotional, irrational, unstable. No, I used something much colder. Paper. Danielle, what is this? Jenna asked, staring at the deed like it had grown fangs. Her voice had dropped an octave. The smirk was gone. Mom leaned forward. You filed this? I turned the page slowly. Transfer of ownership. Danielle Monroe. Grantor. Margaret Monroe. Witnessed. Notarized. Filed with the county clerk. Grandma had been precise. She didn't believe in half measures. She'd told me, when you do something, do it with paperwork. Words fade. Signatures stay. I slid the next form across the table. Record of tax payments, Property ID 113-046B. Every payment since the transfer? Made by me. Utilities? My name. Repairs? My card. Jenna started to say something, but I raised my hand, gently. There's one more. I pulled out a manila envelope. Inside, a formal notice to vacate. Occupants without legal right or lease must vacate within 24 hours or be subject to legal removal. Jenna blinked like she'd been slapped. You're evicting us? No, I said quietly. I'm asking you to leave something that was never yours. But you didn't tell us. I didn't owe you an explanation, I replied. This house has stood on my shoulders for 10 years. I was just keeping it warm, until you all tried to burn it down. Mom looked pale. Dad finally spoke. Sweetheart, let's not make this permanent. I turned to him slowly. You made it permanent the second you watched them dismantle my place at this table and said nothing. The silence was louder than any yelling could have been. They stared at the papers like they couldn't read English. But they knew exactly what they meant. Jenna stood abruptly. This isn't over. I leaned back in my chair. It is for you. She opened her mouth, probably to throw some insult she learned from a Real Housewives episode. I stood too.
Calm. Certain.
I've already contacted the sheriff's office. If you're not gone by tomorrow at noon, I'll have the locks changed and your things moved to the curb. Mom looked horrified. You're throwing out your family? I met her gaze.
No. You did.
The minute you tried to erase me from a home I bled to protect. They walked out together, stunned and seething. And when the front door slammed, I exhaled. I stood in the middle of Grandma's living room, the one she crocheted in, the one I vacuumed every week, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Belonging. Not granted.
Claimed.
I didn't sleep that night. I cleaned. Deep cleaned. Lit candles. Played Grandma's favorite records. And when the sun rose, I sat on the porch, coffee in hand, deed on the table beside me. Because I wasn't going anywhere. And they had 24 hours. They didn't believe I'd do it. Not really. Not Jenna, who always got her way with tantrums dressed as monologues. Not Mom, who could cry guilt like a faucet. Not Dad, whose silence they mistook for diplomacy. But at 8 a.m. sharp, the locksmith arrived. He was early. I'm not changing the locks just yet, I said, sipping my coffee. They've got until noon. He nodded. You want me to wait in the truck? No, I said with a smile. You're my insurance policy. Park out front. At 8:23 a.m., Jenna showed up. Hair in a bun.
Sunglasses on.
Phone pressed to her ear like a weapon. I'm calling a lawyer. I handed her a copy of the deed. Again. Have them read this, I said. And make sure they can explain the part about trespassing. She yanked open the front door, the one she no longer had a right to touch, and stormed in. 10 minutes later, Mom arrived in a bathrobe and fury. You can't do this, Danielle. I leaned on the porch rail. I already did. But we're family. Then you should have treated me like it. She walked right past me into the house. The packing began in rage. Jenna slammed drawers. Mom shouted about heirlooms. I stayed outside. The neighbors peeked from behind curtains. Some waved. They'd seen me mow this lawn every weekend. Fix the siding. Carry groceries for Grandma before she passed. They knew. At 10:41 a.m., Dad showed up. Alone. Quiet. He walked up the steps, didn't say anything for a while. Then, you really filed all that paperwork? I nodded. She gave it to me 2 years before she died, I said. Said she knew they'd try this. He sighed. She always did trust you more. Then why didn't you? He didn't answer, just looked down at his shoes. I handed him a box of his old records from the den. Noon, I said. Not 1 minute after. He nodded. Didn't argue. At 11:58 a.m., they were all outside. Boxes stacked. Rage brewing. Mom tried once more. Where are we supposed to go? You didn't ask me that when you were pushing me out, I replied. You just said I'd be happier elsewhere. I looked at Jenna. How's elsewhere sound to you now? The locksmith stepped up, toolkit ready. I turned the key one last time. The door clicked shut. New locks turned in place. And just like that, the house was mine again. All mine. No ghosts pacing the hall. No judgment in the kitchen. No footsteps stealing Grandma's peace. They stood on the lawn like strangers, blinking in the daylight of their own downfall. I didn't wave. I didn't threaten. I just stood at the window and watched. Because sometimes revenge isn't fire. It's eviction. And theirs was long overdue. 3 days after the locks clicked shut, Jenna filed a complaint. She claimed I forged the deed. That Grandma wasn't in her right mind when she transferred ownership. That I manipulated her. The court clerk dismissed it before it even made it to a hearing. The signatures were clean. The notary was long-standing. The records matched every tax payment. I didn't need to fight. The truth had already done that for me. The only call I got from Jenna after that? A voicemail. You'll regret this. You're going to end up alone. I didn't delete it. I saved it. As a reminder of how small people get when they lose control over you. Mom didn't call at all. But I did get an envelope in the mail a week later. No return address. Inside was a torn photo. Me as a child on Grandma's lap. Both of us smiling in the garden. Ripped down the middle. Message received. Dad was quieter. I got a birthday card in the mail. No note. No name. Just a gift card to the same coffee shop Grandma used to take me to. I sat with that one a little longer. Because even silence can carry weight. Meanwhile, I rebuilt. I repainted the hallway walls. Replanted Grandma's roses. Turned the guest room into a reading nook, the formal dining room into a workspace. I didn't fill the silence with noise. I filled it with purpose. For the first time in years, the house felt like mine, not because of paperwork. Because of peace. One evening, the neighborhood association dropped off a welcome package, even though I'd lived there for over a decade. A card was tucked inside. We always thought it was yours anyway. Glad it's official now. I smiled. Not because they said it, but because I no longer needed anyone to. Jenna, from what I heard, moved into a condo with her third fiancé. Apparently, he owns a crypto startup. Or something. She tried launching a podcast. It fizzled. Mom started freelancing as an interior decorator. Used photos of Grandma's house, my house, in her online portfolio. I sent a cease and desist. Dad stopped showing up altogether. Somehow, that part hurt the least. Because I stopped expecting a man who never showed up in the first place. One day, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the light hit the steps just like it used to when Grandma sat there with me in spring. And I realized something. I wasn't mourning them. I was mourning the idea of them. The illusion that if I just gave enough, they'd finally treat me like I belonged. But I do belong. I always did. They just didn't see it because they were too busy looking in the mirror. Now, I didn't need their reflection. I had built my own. One made of bricks, roots, and silence that finally felt like freedom. 6 months later, I hung a sign on the newly painted porch. Monroe Studio and Design, by appointment only. It wasn't just a home anymore. It was a business. A legacy. An answer to the question they never thought I could ask. What if I stopped surviving and started building? Clients came slowly at first. Local artists. Boutique owners. A teacher who needed help redesigning her reading space on a shoestring budget. They didn't care about my degree or lack of one. They cared that I listened. That I created peace with paintbrushes and purpose. That the girl they once called the quiet one had a gift for turning old rooms into sanctuaries. Word spread. Not viral. Not fast.
But deep.
People came because they heard the energy in my space healed things. The first newspaper piece called me the silent architect of serenity. Another headline read, "She lost her family and found her foundation." I didn't give interviews. I didn't need to. The house spoke loud enough now. I started hosting creative nights, sanctuary sessions, where women brought wine, grief, and dreams too long delayed. We painted. We cried. We rebuilt. Some had been left by lovers. Others abandoned by their own blood. One woman whispered, This place feels like my grandmother's arms. And I knew exactly what she meant. The house had changed. But not out of bitterness. Out of becoming. The kitchen had laughter again. Music played in the mornings. The couch was no longer where my sister scrolled and judged. It was where strangers sat and found softness. One afternoon, I found a sticky note on the front door, written in delicate handwriting. I walked by with my daughter. She asked who lived here. I said, a woman who decided she didn't need permission to stay. I kept that note on my studio wall, not because I needed affirmation, but because every time I looked at it, I remembered the truth. I wasn't the spare daughter. I wasn't the placeholder. I was the foundation. The reason the house never fell. The reason Grandma died knowing her legacy wouldn't be sold to the highest bidder.
And now?
Now I was more than just a survivor of betrayal. I was a creator. A builder. A woman who stood in the very space they tried to take and turned it into a throne of soft power. I didn't need revenge. I needed walls that didn't echo with resentment. I needed peace that didn't ask me to shrink. And most of all, I needed a future that wasn't tied to anyone's approval. So I built one. One brushstroke at a time. One contract at a time. One memory overwritten by something better. And in the middle of it all?
Me.
The daughter they forgot. The woman they underestimated. Now the name on every deed, every receipt, every doorbell chime. Monroe.
Not just a last name.
A rebirth. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when I heard the knock. 3 soft raps. Not urgent. Not angry. Just tired. I opened the door slowly, half expecting a delivery, maybe a neighbor. But there she stood. Jenna. Hair soaked, hoodie pulled tight. No makeup. No heels. No attitude. Just a shadow of the girl who once sat at my dinner table and told me, "You have 1 week to leave." She didn't speak right away. Neither did I. Her eyes scanned the porch, the new sign, the fresh paint, the potted lavender Grandma always loved. Then, softly, "It's beautiful." I stepped aside, but didn't invite her in. She got the message. She stood under the awning, dripping. "I lost the apartment," she said. "The crypto guy? Turns out charm doesn't pay rent." I said nothing. She exhaled. "I was awful to you." Still, I said nothing. I don't even remember why I hated you so much. Maybe because you made staying look stronger than leaving. That one stung. Because it was true. "Mom's been staying with me," she added. "She won't say it, but she misses you. Dad moved in with a cousin. No one talks much anymore." The family fell apart after I left?
No.
They just finally noticed the glue was gone. I came to ask, her voice cracked. "If there's a way back. For me." I looked her dead in the eye.
Calm. Clear. No.
She blinked. "Danielle. You said I'd regret this. That I'd end up alone. But I've never been more surrounded by peace. By people who see me.
Who pay.
Who stay." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I was just scared," she whispered. I nodded. "So was I. And I still chose to be kind. You chose to conquer." She dropped her gaze. I reached behind the door, pulled out a small box. Inside, her old journals, a few earrings, a photo of her and Grandma I found behind the dresser. "I figured you might come eventually." She took the box with shaking hands. "I'm sorry." "I believe you," I said. "But I also remember you." She nodded, stepped back. Then, just before turning away, she said, "You were always the strong one. We just didn't want to see it." I closed the door without a word. Not because I hated her. Because I didn't need her anymore. Not for love. Not for approval. Not even for closure. I stood in my entryway, listening to the soft patter of rain against the windows. Then walked to my studio, lit a candle, picked up a brush, and painted a single line down a blank canvas. The beginning of something new.
Because this was the end.
Not of the house,
but of the hold they had on me.
They thought they were cutting me off, that they could evict me from a life they barely understood. But they didn't realize. I was the deed. I was the foundation. I was the key.
And now?
The door only opens for peace.